You've been told to pick one thing, one skill, one lane, one version of yourself that's clean enough to put on a resume. And every time you try, something resists. Not laziness, not fear, exactly. Something deeper, something that feels almost biological. Like your mind was built for more than one room. What if it was? You know the moment. Someone at a dinner party asks what you do, and you pause, not because you don't know, but because the true answer doesn't fit in a sentence. You're a writer who loves systems, a designer who reads neuroscience, a strategist who keeps picking up instruments, a data person who can't stop making things with their hands. So you compress, you simplify, you offer one piece of yourself and quietly fold the rest away. And you drive home feeling like you just introduced a stranger. This isn't a small thing. It affects how you make decisions. Because every path forward means leaving something behind. And you can't figure out which loss is acceptable. It affects your relationships. Because people who know you well use words like scattered or all over the place. And even when they mean it kindly, it lands like a verdict. It shapes your inner voice. You tell yourself you lack discipline, that real professionals commit, that maybe you're just someone who starts things and never finishes. You look at specialists, people with one clear title, one clear mastery, and you feel something complicated. Admiration, yes, but also a quiet shame you never quite say out loud. Psychologists call people like you multipotentialites, a term most associated with researcher Emily Wapnick. But the label isn't what matters. What matters is that your brain operates on a different architecture. And the career system you've been trying to fit yourself into was never designed for it. The pressure to specialize is not a natural law. It's a historical artifact. The Industrial Revolution needed workers who could perform one task, repeatedly, efficiently, without variation. That economic demand shaped schools, shaped hiring, shaped the advice your parents gave you because it was the advice that kept people safe. But the world that produced that advice no longer exists. And your resistance to narrowing down, that persistent, almost irrational pull toward more, is not a glitch in your character. Evolutionary psychologists point out that early human communities survive not through specialization alone, but through the presence of generalists, people who could navigate, negotiate, heal, and build. Breadth was a form of resilience. Your brain didn't miss the memo on specialization. It's running an older, more adaptive program. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you've been applying the wrong map to a landscape that needs a different one entirely. Here's what's actually happening inside your brain and why it matters. When you encounter something new, a skill, a concept, a creative domain, your brain releases dopamine. Most people describe dopamine as the pleasure chemical, but neuroscientist Jack Panksepp was more precise. He called it the seeking chemical. It's not about satisfaction. It's about the drive to explore, to pursue, to want to understand what's around the next corner. For most people, that dopamine response dampens quickly as something becomes familiar. For you, the signal fires more broadly, across more domains, at a lower novelty threshold. Your brain doesn't just seek, it seeks widely. Think of it this way. Most brains function like a spotlight, intense, focused, concentrated on one point in the dark. Your brain functions more like a lantern. It casts light across more of the room at once. A spotlight is better for reading a single page. A lantern is better for understanding where you are. But here's the hidden cost of the lantern. When you keep shifting between interests before any one of them consolidates, your brain never fully builds what cognitive scientists call automated pattern recognition, the deep structural knowledge that lets experts see what beginners can't. You accumulate breadth, but you rarely feel the confidence that comes from depth. So you carry this strange internal contradiction. You know a great deal, but you rarely feel like you know enough. That gap between actual knowledge and felt competence is what psychologists call the imposter experience. And for multipotentialites, it's almost universal. The solution isn't to force the lantern to behave like a spotlight. The solution is to learn how to aim the lantern deliberately, strategically, so that it illuminates something no spotlight ever could. This is the M-shaped career model. You may have heard of the T-shaped professional, broad awareness, one area of depth. The M shape goes further. It describes someone with genuine depth in 2 or 3 domains, connected by broad awareness across many. This isn't a compromise for people who couldn't commit. It is a distinct professional architecture, and one the modern economy is increasingly hungry for. Here is how to build it. Step 1. Stop choosing between interests. Start mapping where they meet. The standard advice is to evaluate your interests and eliminate. Should it be writing or design? Psychology or business? That framing is the wrong unit of analysis. Because psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi found across decades of creativity research that the most original and impactful work rarely emerges from within a single discipline. It emerges at the boundary between two. A musician who understands mathematics hears architecture in sound. A biologist who reads philosophy frames research questions differently. Your intersections are not distractions. They are the precise location of your competitive advantage. Practical exercise: write down your 5 most persistent interests. Then draw lines between them. Ask where 2 of them produce something that neither produces alone. That intersection is not where you compromise. That is where you live. Step 2. Build depth in 2 domains, chosen strategically. The M shape requires at least 2 genuine areas of depth, not encyclopedic expertise. Functional depth, the point at which your pattern recognition becomes automatic. Cognitive scientists estimate this requires roughly 500 to 1,000 hours of deliberate, progressively challenging practice. That is achievable, even across multiple interests. The strategic element is choosing 2 domains that are complementary rather than competing. One technical, one interpretive. One that the market values highly. One that makes you irreplaceable. One that solves problems. One that frames them. A concrete example: someone who develops depth in behavioral economics and product design becomes more valuable than a specialist in either, because almost no one carries both. And the combination explains how humans actually make decisions inside digital environments. Choose your 2 anchors. Build awareness around them. Let the rest of your interests serve them. Step 3. Recognize your role as a translator. There is a career function that multipotentialites are uniquely equipped for and almost never taught to name. Translation. In complex organizations, specialists routinely fail to communicate with each other. The engineer doesn't speak the language of the strategist. The researcher doesn't speak the language of the client. The builder doesn't speak the language of the human who will use what they built. The person who can stand in the middle, who understands enough of each world to carry meaning between them, is rare and extraordinarily valuable. Organizational psychologists call this boundary spanning, a documented behavior where individuals who bridge distinct knowledge communities create disproportionate impact. Your breadth isn't baggage. It is a translation capacity in a world full of people who only speak one language. When you walk into a room, you are often the only person who can see the whole map. That is not a consolation. That is a role. Step 4. Commit to sequential depth, not permanent narrowing. You do not have to choose your interests forever. You have to commit to them long enough to build something real. Carol Dweck's research on the growth mindset established that the brain continues forming new neural pathways in response to challenge well into adulthood, as long as the challenge is progressive and sustained. This means depth is not a permanent destination. It is a phase. You can go deep in one domain for 3 years, extract genuine expertise, then carry that architecture into the next chapter. This is called serial mastery, a pattern visible in many of the most impactful creative and intellectual lives in history. The condition that makes it work: each chapter must be taken seriously. Curiosity earns you entry. Discipline is what makes it count. If you leave every interest the moment it becomes difficult, you collect exposure without ever building weight. Stay long enough to earn depth, then carry it forward. Step 5, re-narrate your range as architecture, not apology. The final shift is linguistic, but it's grounded in psychology. Psychologist Dan McAdams spent decades studying narrative identity, the idea that the story you tell about your own life shapes both your self-perception and how others interpret you. Most multipotentialites narrate their range defensively. I know it seems like I've jumped around a lot. I haven't stayed in one lane, but that framing signals incoherence, even when the underlying experience was intentional and rich. A reframed narration signals design. My work sits at the intersection of systems thinking and human behavior. I build bridges between technical complexity and human understanding. I specialize in the space where two fields haven't learned to talk to each other yet. Same history, entirely different meaning. Your story is not a liability. It is a positioning statement, if you learn to tell it with intention. So here's the model, held simply. You are not a spotlight. You are a lantern. And the M shape is the frame that teaches you how to aim it. 2 genuine areas of depth, broad awareness as connective tissue, and the rare capacity to stand between worlds and translate what most people cannot see across them. That is not a workaround for people who couldn't commit. That is a distinct cognitive architecture, increasingly rare, increasingly necessary, in an economy built on complexity that no single specialist can fully navigate alone. You are never supposed to fit inside a single lane. Your brain was built for a different kind of road. The work ahead is not to shrink yourself until you're simple enough to explain at a dinner party. The work is to build something expansive enough to hold everything you actually are. That takes time. It takes patience with yourself on the days when scattered feels like your only honest word. And it takes a quiet kind of courage, the kind that doesn't announce itself, to stop apologizing for a mind that refuses to be just one thing. The world doesn't only need people who go deep into one room. It needs people who can move between rooms. People who can carry an idea from one world into another and see what it becomes. That has always been you. You just needed a framework to stop calling it a problem.